Hi, I'm Seraphine. My sister stole our grandmother's $1 million fund, then fired me from the family business like I never existed. My parents? They stood behind her, said I was being emotional. But it wasn't just the money, it was the erasure. The quiet way they rewrote history, cutting me out of photos, off documents, out of every room I helped build. They thought I'd stay quiet, that I'd accept crumbs while they toasted to legacy. But what if I told you I kept records? What if I told you my silence wasn't surrender? It was strategy. What really happened behind closed doors? And how did I turn their betrayal into my beginning? They buried Grandma Miriam on a breezy Monday morning in early spring. The sun was unseasonably warm for Austin this time of year, and yet the warmth didn't reach my chest. I stood near the second row, slightly behind my sister Callista, who had claimed the front without hesitation. She wore black like the rest of us, but with a wide-brimmed hat tilted just enough to make sure she looked mournful, but camera-ready. I didn't cry. Not in the way most people do. I had already done my grieving. Months of slow, silent heartbreak as I watched the woman who raised me fade. While Callista posted inspirational quotes with filters over old photos, I was the one changing bedpans and adjusting morphine drips at 3 a.m. Ruth Calder, Grandma's best friend of nearly 50 years, approached me after the service. She touched my wrist lightly, her hand trembling more than usual. She wanted you to have something, you know? I looked at her, confused. What do you mean? Ruth slipped a small envelope into my palm. No name, no return address, just a soft imprint of time on its edges. She told me not to hand it to anyone but you. Then she shuffled off, her thin black flats making no sound on the grass. Inside the car, I opened it. I don't know what I expected. Maybe a letter, maybe a photo. Instead, it was a scrap of lined paper, torn from the kind of pad Grandma kept by her bedside. In shaky, slanted script, it read, "For S, only trust her." That was it. No explanation, no will, no notary. Just my initial and the implication that she knew something would go wrong. I reread that line at least 10 times before folding it again and slipping it into my wallet. My chest tightened, not from sadness this time, but from something else. A knot of something unsaid, something rotten, beginning to take shape. 2 days later, I found myself inside the downtown branch of the bank Grandma and I had visited together years ago to set up an emergency joint account. Back then, she'd said, "If anything happens, you'll know where to look." I asked to speak with a representative. The banker, a man in his late 20s with a buzz cut and hesitant smile, pulled up the file. "Looks like the co-owner on this account was changed recently," he said, tilting the screen slightly. "Changed?" I leaned forward. "To who?" He glanced at the monitor, then back at me. "Callista Dorn." My stomach dropped. "That's impossible. I never authorized any changes. I never signed anything." He squinted. "We have a digital signature on file. Looks like it was submitted 7 days before the primary account holder passed." 7 days. Grandma couldn't even hold a pen at that point, let alone dictate a legal change. "Can I see the verification? A video? Something?" The banker shifted uncomfortably. It was an online submission. No video, just an e-signature. I stood there, stunned. I should have known. Callista had always been the polished one, the one who knew how to bend rules without appearing to touch them. That evening, we gathered at my parents' house for a post-funeral dinner. Callista made a toast, naturally. To Grandma's legacy, and our shared responsibility to carry it forward. She raised her glass like she was accepting an award. Franklin, our father, nodded. Loretta, our mother, offered her usual polite smile. I waited until people were seated before I spoke. "I need to ask about something. The joint account Grandma set up. Someone changed the co-owner a week before she passed. I checked. It was Callista." My sister didn't flinch. "You've always misunderstood how things work, little sis." She sipped her wine. I looked at our mother. "Did you know?" Loretta didn't blink. "Let's not make this about money, Seraphine." "Your grandmother would hate that." There it was. The dismissal wrapped in manners. The knife behind the lace curtain. That night, I lay in bed, my body stiff against the mattress. I remembered Grandma's voice when she was still lucid. "Keep the lights on for me, S. They'll try to rewrite what's mine." I had brushed it off then. Thought she was being paranoid. Now I wasn't so sure. I got up, made tea, and opened my laptop. I started sifting through old emails, scanned PDFs, even receipts from drugstore runs and hospice payments. This wasn't just about grief, this was theft, and it was dressed in pearls and toasts. Around 2 a.m., just as I was screenshotting a digital trail of account logins, my phone buzzed. A text from Callista. "Family financial review scheduled Friday. See you there." I stared at the message, already knowing what she was planning, and I was done playing nice. 3 days after the funeral, just as I was finishing a cup of lukewarm coffee and avoiding opening my inbox, my phone buzzed. A message from the family group chat. Yes, the one I was barely acknowledged in, lit up the screen. "New family portraits uploaded. Feel free to share." I tapped the link. A digital album opened. It was from the memorial service, taken by some freelance photographer Callista probably hired without telling anyone. The photos were polished, soft-filtered, everyone in coordinated black and navy, standing by the floral arrangements like it was a styled event. They were all there: Callista, Franklin, Loretta, even a few cousins I barely recognized anymore. Every angle, every smiling, grieving pose. And in all 52 photos, not a single frame had me in it. I scrolled slowly, eyes narrowing. In one wide shot, I spotted the back of my head, blurred, nearly cropped out. I remembered standing nearby, just 10 feet away. "Was I really invisible?" I muttered, "or did someone make me that way?" By noon, I was in my mother's kitchen, trying to keep my voice steady. "Did you see the family album from the memorial?" Loretta didn't look up from rinsing a glass. "Callista forwarded it, yes. Lovely photos. There's not a single picture of me." She turned, dabbing her hands on a towel. "You weren't really in the frame. You were standing off to the side, remember? I was standing next to you when they took the main shot." She offered a non-committal shrug, the kind that could make a person feel small without a single harsh word. "Well, that picture was for the company's year-end presentation. You're not listed on the leadership team anymore." The way she said it, "not anymore," as if I'd never belonged in the first place. That night, I was still replaying that moment when my phone buzzed again. This time, it wasn't from the family thread. Callista just moved everything out of the Hale Reserve account. "Thought you should know." The message came from Rachel, an old college friend who still worked in compliance at the bank. I sat upright. My fingers moved before my thoughts could catch up. I logged into the reserve account that Grandma and I had reviewed together so many times, the one labeled Community Emergency Support, Hale Family. Balance, $0. There were no pending transfers, no visible breakdown, just gone. I called Callista. No answer. I tried again, straight to voicemail. A minute later, my phone buzzed. "Let's not confuse legacy with entitlement." That was all she said. I stared at the message, my jaw locked. Grandma had started that fund with the idea that if something ever happened, illness, job loss, anything, no one in the family would ever have to beg for help. Now, it was just another tool Callista had used to tighten her grip. The next evening, I showed up at what they were calling a family trust optimization dinner. Of course, it was held at a private dining room in one of Austin's most exclusive downtown steakhouses. Callista never missed a chance to turn anything into a production. She was already standing when I walked in, dressed in a cream blouse and gold necklace set I recognized from one of Grandma's boxes. Franklin stood beside her, beaming like he'd just handed her the keys to a kingdom. Loretta, seated, looked me over with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Glad you could make it, sweetheart. Callista's got quite the plan." Callista cleared her throat and launched into a presentation. Literal slides, printed handouts, charts projected on a screen. Projections, consolidation benefits, philanthropic initiatives, streamlining legacy. All jargon, all noise. But in the 27 pages, my name never appeared once. When the QA portion began, I leaned forward. "What about the Hale Reserve?" I asked, voice level. Callista didn't even blink. It's being consolidated for clarity. You were never on the paperwork. I laughed, quietly, once. Loretta stiffened. Is that really necessary? Funny, I said, looking at Franklin. How easy it is to delete someone when they're the one who did the work and asked the least. Callista offered me a smile so tight it nearly cracked. We all contribute in different ways. Driving home, I didn't bother turning the radio on. The streets were dim, familiar. My knuckles tightened on the wheel. No one can make you feel inferior without your consent. Eleanor Roosevelt's words came back to me in full clarity, and for the first time in a long while, I stopped consenting. I had spent years trying to earn my place in a family that had drawn lines I didn't know existed until I'd stepped over one. I wasn't forgotten. I had been deliberately left out. Back in my apartment, I didn't cry. I opened my laptop, created a new folder. Operation Clarity. I started with financial activity logs, screenshots, internal messages, statement screenshots. I labeled everything meticulously. Finally, I opened that damn family photo again, the wide one where I was just a sliver of a shadow at the edge. I cropped it, framed only myself. It felt petty. It felt perfect. I didn't know it then, but that simple act of cropping the photo would become my first quiet declaration of war. The sun filtered lazily through the curtains of Grandma Miriam's old house. It was the kind of morning that should have felt nostalgic, comforting even. But instead, the air was heavy with the sound of boxes being dragged, taped, and sealed. It was the official clean-out day, a weekend ritual agreed upon by the family before listing the house for sale. Loretta said we should all do our part, but the roles were clearly unspoken. Callista orchestrated like she was running a political campaign, clipboard in hand, directing cousins like hired movers. I barely got a nod when I walked in. I didn't stay in the living room. I made my way to the sewing room in the back, a small space cluttered with half-finished quilts, thread tins, faded Polaroids, and the scent of cedar and lavender. It smelled like her, the only room they hadn't touched. On a bottom shelf, I found it. The album. Hardbound, dark blue with corners worn from years of flipping. It was the one I made for her when the doctors said comfort care. I'd filled it with photos from our late-night grocery runs, snapshots of her in oversized socks giving the finger to chemo, captions like Chief Mischief Officer and Still Kicking at 87. I smiled despite myself. My eyes lingered on one page, her holding my hand, both of us laughing, my messy bun and her wild wig looking like a sitcom pair. I set the album gently on the coffee table in the living room. Then I slipped away to the hallway to grab a few of her framed knitting awards. Nothing fancy, but meaningful. 5 minutes, maybe 10. When I came back, the album was gone. I blinked, looked around, checked under the table, behind a box of vases. Nothing. Mom? I called out toward the kitchen. Loretta emerged, drying her hands on a dish towel. That photo book that was here, did you see it? She looked at me, then past me, her tone casual. It didn't seem relevant anymore. Excuse me. It was falling apart. And there's only so much we can keep. We've got real estate photos scheduled next week. Callista's voice piped in from the dining room. Besides, it looked homemade. A bit messy for staging, you know? I just stood there. Not because it was about the book, but because it confirmed what I hadn't dared say aloud. They weren't just packing up Grandma's things. They were erasing her, and me along with it. Later that day, during lunch on the patio, Franklin picked at his sandwich and launched into a soft-voiced lecture about respecting legacy. Some folks, he said, not looking at me but clearly meaning me, seemed to think every dollar Grandma had was theirs to claim. Loretta chimed in, buttering a roll. It's unsettling when grief turns into greed. Callista didn't say anything. She just tilted her glass of sparkling water and smirked. The words landed like slaps I wasn't supposed to flinch from. I didn't respond, not with words, but my grip tightened around the fork in my hand until the metal bit into my skin. What they didn't know, what they refused to remember, was that for months, I had been the one paying Grandma's electric bill when she couldn't keep the heat on. I was the one who refilled her prescriptions, delivered her groceries, coordinated with hospice. They dropped by with flowers and thoughts and prayers, posed for pictures, and left. After dinner, I stayed behind in the sewing room, staring at the now empty shelf. I ran my hand along the dust line where the album had sat for nearly a year. Then the memory hit me. One night, Miriam had grabbed my hand and whispered, "Make sure they don't tell my story wrong." I hadn't known what she meant, now I did. By nightfall, I was home, laptop open, tea untouched beside me. I began combing through receipts, Venmo transactions, emails confirming hospice visits. I opened Excel, labeled the file, proof of presence. Line by line, I tracked every dollar I'd spent. Not to shame them, at least not yet, but to remember for myself that I had been there, that I wasn't the ghost they wanted me to be. Around 11 p.m., a message popped up on my phone. FYI, looks like Callista's filing for a full family trust restructure. You're not on it. It was from Jordan at the local legal clinic, someone I'd helped once during a grant writing seminar. I had no idea she'd kept tabs on the Dorn family name. I didn't cry. I just shut the laptop, leaned back in my chair, and exhaled long and low. So it begins. Link to next chapter. The next time I saw her, I didn't say a word, but I was already 5 moves ahead. I showed up 10 minutes early. Franklin's email had called it a strategic family asset alignment session, which sounded just vague enough to set off every alarm bell in my head. The law office was sterile and sharp, all brushed steel and glass dividers. Declan Voss had been our family attorney for years, more of a formal fixture than someone I trusted. Still, I came prepared. I wore a navy blazer, pressed slacks, no jewelry except Grandma's thin gold bangle. My hair was tied back, clipboard in hand. I had notes, questions, documents flagged in color-coded tabs. I was ready to advocate for myself. Declan stepped into the lobby, eyebrows lifting slightly when he saw me. "Seraphine," he said slowly, "I wasn't informed you'd be part of this meeting." I didn't flinch. "I'm here. That's enough." He gestured for me to follow. The boardroom was already set up. Callista sat at the head of the table, sipping something from a branded tumbler, her phone glowing beside her. Franklin leaned back, arms crossed like a man who knew he had the upper hand. No one offered me a seat. Declan began pulling up documents on a large monitor, trust summaries, real estate holdings, corporate accounts. As he spoke, I watched the names scroll. Callista Dorn, Franklin Dorn. Repeat. Not once did mine appear. I waited until the third document before interrupting. "Why am I not listed on anything?" Declan hesitated. "You're not currently named as a stakeholder in any active trust entity or property ledger." I looked directly at my father. "You said, when Grandma was first put into care, that everything would be split, that the trust was for both of us." Franklin's mouth twitched, but he didn't speak. I turned back to Declan. "So what exactly am I doing here?" The screen flipped to a summary page. 2 names again. No mention of me. "Without stakeholder status," Declan said, careful with his tone, "you're not eligible to request audits or influence allocations within the family trust." I didn't move. "You're saying I have no legal standing?" Loretta's voice crackled from a speakerphone at the end of the table. "You're not being excluded, Seraphine. You were never formally involved on paper. That's a legal oversight, not a personal slight." Callista exhaled sharply through her nose. "If you'd taken more interest in the business side years ago, maybe you'd have thought to ask. But you were always the caregiver. You said you didn't want a seat at the table." "I didn't ask for scraps," I replied, my voice even. "I asked for integrity." The room fell into one of those silences that isn't quiet. It hums with every word not being said. Declan finally cleared his throat. "Given your non-participation in the legal framework, I'll need to conclude this portion of the meeting without your involvement." He was asking me to leave. I stood slowly, took one final glance at the screen, and walked out. Not in a storm. No slammed doors. Just silence. I drove for a while after that. Not to anywhere specific. just away. Past grocery stores I used to run errands at for Grandma. Past the park where she and I had once sat on a bench, laughing at the ducks fighting over bread. Later that evening, I found myself on my apartment's tiny balcony, tea in hand. The sky was streaked with oranges and pinks, like it was trying to apologize for the day. I opened my phone and texted my CPA. Start pulling records from 2017 to present. I want everything. Every transfer. Every asset. Then I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I'd started weeks ago. Operation Clarity. I created a new subfolder, Proof of Exclusion. Inside it, I dropped a screenshot of that stakeholder screen, then the trust document PDF, then the email invite that had omitted my name in the CC line. Half an hour later, a notification pinged from the family's internal business portal. Notice, family restructure in progress. Seraphine Hale not included in shareholder review. They didn't even bother hiding it. I stared at the screen for a full minute. Then I said it out loud, softly, but with the weight of steel behind every syllable. This isn't just about Grandma anymore. Link to next chapter. The next morning, I walked into the building like I still belonged, because they hadn't figured out I never needed their door to open mine. The conference room smelled like catered chicken Caesar wraps and lemon-scented Windex. Everything about it screamed image management, not family business strategy. I arrived 5 minutes early, only to find Callista already perched at the head of the long mahogany table, her heels crossed at the ankle, clicking through her color-coded agenda like she was prepping to brief the press. Franklin stood nearby, arms folded, watching her like a proud investor. I knew the role I was expected to play. Take notes, stay quiet, nod appropriately. Seraphine, you're here. Great, Callista said, not bothering to look up. We've got a lot to get through. Franklin smiled faintly. Your sister's really taking initiative. That's what leadership looks like. I sat at the far end of the table and opened my notebook slowly. Callista kicked off her pitch like a TED Talk. We're entering a new brand cycle, she began, and to align with evolving client expectations, we're proposing a strategic rebrand rooted in legacy but positioned for growth. She clicked to the next slide, a familiar logo, one I'd sketched in a notebook 6 years ago during a 2 a.m. call with a biotech startup desperate for an identity. The slide beneath read, Dorn Vision, Case Study, Hollowgate Systems. My breath caught. That project had been mine from start to finish. I'd sourced the client, handled the negotiations, stayed up 3 nights straight drafting the deliverables. Franklin leaned forward, nodding. You've got a CEO mind, Cal. I blinked hard. You didn't even know the client's last name, I said, voice low but steady. Callista didn't flinch. I executed the vision. That's what matters. I should have expected it, I really should have, but knowing something is coming doesn't lessen the sting when it arrives. After the meeting, I slipped into the hallway for air. Loretta followed. She always did love a good postmortem. You keep confusing effort with impact, she said, arms crossed. Excuse me? You're diligent, Seraphine. No one denies that. But this is business. You don't build legacy on lunch deliveries and midnight paperwork. My eyes narrowed. So loyalty, time, and showing up when nobody else would, none of that counts? It counts, she said, smiling sweetly. Just not in a way that scales. That was the moment I realized. They didn't just rewrite my role. They redefined it as irrelevant. Back home, I poured myself a glass of wine and pulled out the hard drive I'd been compiling. I opened a blank Word document and began typing. Major client wins, 2017 to 2023. Verified by email trail. Slide by slide, I matched client contracts to timestamps, invoices to my name, correspondences where I negotiated deals while Callista was off in Napa or Palm Springs. I bookmarked an article I'd seen floating around LinkedIn recently. When they take credit, you take records. Fitting. They could claim I didn't matter. But I had receipts. My mind drifted back to a long weekend 3 years ago when Hollowgate threatened to walk. I stayed in the office 36 hours straight, eating almonds and stale coffee while rewriting specs from scratch. Callista had been wine tasting that weekend. She came back Monday, did a photo op with their CEO, and posted, "Success is a team sport." I never commented, never corrected. Until now. Around midnight, as I finished compiling the folder, my laptop buzzed. Internal HR notification. New organizational structure. Draft access. Granted to Callista Dorn. That was it. No other names. Not even Franklin's. Certainly not mine. I leaned back in my chair, staring at the glow of the screen. They're building a future that doesn't include me. Link to next chapter. I wasn't going to wait to be erased. I had already started carving my name somewhere they couldn't reach. Friday started like any other. I woke up early, made my usual coffee with the almond milk I never admitted I liked, and opened my laptop to prepare for the monthly investor call. I had done the prep work already, slide decks, financials, performance trends, but I like to run through everything one more time before going live. The smell of coffee hadn't even left the air when I saw it. No subject line, no greeting, just an attachment labeled, "Termination Notice, effective immediately." I didn't open it right away. I just sat there, blinking at the screen like it had made a mistake. Then I clicked, a single-page PDF. Plain, clinical, my name at the top. A statement at the center. Your employment has been terminated effective immediately. Company property and access have been revoked. That was it. No reason, no call, no prior meeting, no thank you. I reached for my work laptop, heart pounding, and tried to log in. Access denied. Texted Franklin. No answer. I dialed Callista. She didn't pick up either, but a minute later, a text appeared. This was the board's decision. We all have to evolve. That was her version of a goodbye. 15 years of building clients, handling crises, saving deals, and I didn't even rate a sentence. I didn't cry. I stood up, put on my blazer like I always did before heading to the office, and drove straight there. When I pulled into the parking lot, my keycard wouldn't work. I tried 3 times before stepping back and taking a deep breath. Through the glass, I could see Callista in the lobby, laughing with a group of clients I had brought in last year. She was dressed in white, of course, as if to signal she was the new era. I didn't knock. I didn't make a scene. Security appeared before I even reached the front doors. "Ma'am," one of them said gently, "you've been asked not to enter the premises." "Ma'am," like I was a stranger now. I didn't argue, just nodded once and turned around. My heels echoed on the pavement as I walked back to my car. On the drive home, I remembered something I hadn't let myself think about in years. I was 25 when I got into Stanford's graduate program, fully funded. I was 1 week away from moving when Franklin sat me down in the kitchen and said, "Your sister got into Wharton. She needs the money. You'll always have time." So I gave it up. So she could go. She went. I stayed. And I never asked for anything after that. Not out of some noble loyalty, but because I didn't think I needed to. I thought they saw it, understood it. That was the last time I made that mistake. Back in my apartment, I hung up my blazer, closed the blinds, and opened my personal laptop. I deleted the draft of the investor call. It wasn't my responsibility anymore. Then I opened the folder labeled Marigold Trust. Line by line, I started reviewing the documents I had been quietly collecting. Client contracts, communications, timelines of negotiation. I remembered a quote that had once struck me like lightning when I first read it in college. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. Maya Angelou had never sounded more right. That night, after dinner and a quiet walk, I sat down again and created 2 new documents. 1. Unauthorized termination timeline. 2. Client acquisition under my name. Evidence chain. I cross-referenced dates, emails, call records. If they were going to cut me loose like a liability, I was going to show them who the real asset had been. At 11:08 p.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Sarah, a friend who worked at a local HR consulting firm. "Heard what happened. Want to talk about legal recourse?" I stared at the screen for a moment, then I smiled, clicked into my browser. New LLC. Business name, Marigold Consulting filed. They locked me out of the building, but forgot I built half the foundation. 2 weeks after being fired, I thought the sting would have dulled, but it hadn't. It had sharpened, refined itself into a kind of clarity I hadn't known I was capable of. That morning, while I was folding laundry and half listening to a podcast on small business tax codes, my phone buzzed with a name I hadn't seen in years: Marcus Yates. Marcus had done contract accounting for our family firm years ago, before Callista's modernization booted him for being too old school. He never struck me as someone to stir a pot without good reason. I picked up. Marcus? He didn't waste time. Your sister's been moving money, Seraphine. Large sums, categorized under consulting fees, but no invoices, no third-party disclosures. I sat down, towel still in my lap. What are you saying? I'm saying something's off. I'd tell you more, but I'd prefer not to be named. He hung up before I could ask another question. That evening, I dug into public loan records. 3 separate lines of credit taken out in the company name, secured by my parents' personal property: their house, the lake cabin, the commercial space our office was in. Meanwhile, Callista's Instagram still painted the same picture: a woman on top of her game, smiling in tailored blazers at panels about female leadership, clinking glasses with venture capitalists at rooftop charity events, hashtags like #LegacyBuilder and #modern matriarch underneath. I scrolled past one photo, her in Paris, tagged at some Women in Entrepreneurship summit, and muttered aloud, "You can fool LinkedIn, but you can't fool the bank." The next day, I visited Ruth at Golden Pines. We sat in the rec room with the TV on low and a tray of lemon bars between us. I hadn't even mentioned anything when she slid a folded bank statement across the table. "This is from your mother's joint account," she said. I still help her reconcile things now and then when she remembers to ask. I opened it and froze. Callista withdrew over $80,000 since the funeral, Ruth added. Said it was for memorial expenses. We didn't even spend 12, I whispered. That was just catering and the chapel. Ruth nodded slowly. Your mother never sees the full statements. Callista sends her summaries. And Loretta, well, she's always trusted what she wanted to hear. My jaw clenched so tight I felt the pressure in my molars. Back at home, I opened a blank spreadsheet and began to build. Unauthorized disbursements versus verified expenses. I listed withdrawals, dates, amounts, and aligned them with Callista's high-profile appearances. Every brand partnership, every donation gala, every public award speech seemed to line up with a consulting fee or vendor payment from one of our shared accounts. She used grief as her pitch deck, I muttered. That night, Ruth called again. Her voice was low, as if someone might be listening. I need to warn you, she said. Your father's about to sign over full power of attorney to Callista. I didn't speak. She told him you were unstable, that you were threatening the family. My eyes didn't even twitch. Then it's time I act like a threat. The next morning, I stopped by Ruth's again. Before I left, she handed me a small leather notepad. One of Grandma Miriam's, lined pages yellowed with time, her name embossed on the corner. I kept it because of this, Ruth said, tapping the last page. She wrote it the week before she died. I flipped it open, just one line, scribbled in her hand. S. Protect what's ours. She doesn't understand consequence. I closed the notebook carefully and tucked it into my bag. At home, I placed it inside the drawer where I kept my documents. Then I locked it. She will, I whispered. Link to next chapter. I stopped mourning what they stole and started focusing on what I still controlled. The invitation came in a text from Loretta, written in her usual clipped tone like she was inviting me to a book club and not a staged ambush. Dinner at the house. Just family. 7 p.m. Please come. No explanation, no subject line. Just enough to make me pause. I called Ruth. She answered on the first ring. They're not calling you back, she said. They're calling for backup. Still, I went. Not because I expected reconciliation, but because I wasn't about to let them control the narrative. Not again. I wore all black, not for drama, but because it sharpened me, made my posture less forgivable. And I brought a flash drive in my pocket, labeled, numbered, Documented. Franklin greeted me at the door with forced warmth, his tie slightly crooked like he hadn't decided what role he was playing yet, patriarch or PR crisis manager. The table was set like it always had been when guests came over, linen napkins folded into fans, the good plates we weren't allowed to use growing up. But it wasn't the decor that told me something was off. It was the silence. Callista sat at the far end of the table, perfectly still, eyes cold. Loretta hovered by the sideboard, smoothing her already flat blouse. Franklin cleared his throat. "Thank you for coming tonight," he began. "This family has weathered a lot, and we think it's time to put everything behind us. What matters now is unity, healing the family name." He always loved that phrase, the family name, as if it were a brand, not a legacy soaked in compromise. Loretta's voice trembled, but not from emotion, from calculation. "If you ever loved your mother," she said, "you'll help us save what's left." Callista didn't speak, but her glare was steady, like she knew what was coming and had already decided how she'd spin it. I let them finish their little play. Then I pulled out the flash drive, placed it calmly on the table, and slid a printout forward. $82,450, I said. That's how much was withdrawn from the Hale Reserve account after Grandma passed. The account meant for hospice, for emergencies. Loretta's hand flew to her chest. "That's absurd," I continued. "Invoices never submitted. Transfers labeled under consulting fees with no vendor attached. And the timing? Always aligned with Callista's public appearances." Callista laughed. A dry, unbothered sound. "You're bluffing." I leaned in. "Say that again, with a lawyer in the room." Franklin stood up abruptly. "You're tearing this family apart." "No," I replied, meeting his eyes. "I'm showing you what it actually looks like." The room went quiet, so quiet I could hear the tick of the antique wall clock Miriam used to wind by hand every Saturday morning. I rose from my chair, tucked my hair behind one ear, and looked at my mother. "You knew. Maybe not the details. But you knew." She didn't deny it. She just stared at the flash drive like it had burned the table. Without another word, I walked out, heels clicking against the floor, each step a line drawn in stone. At home, I didn't turn on the lights. I sat by the window, watching dusk settle over the neighborhood like a blanket pulled too tight. I waited. 1 hour, 2, no calls, no texts. I glanced at my wall calendar, circled in red. Drift Shade Biotech, client transfer meeting. They'd already agreed to hear me out, and they weren't the only ones. I whispered into the dark, "Time to move forward, not back." Just before midnight, my inbox dinged. Subject: Notice of Inquiry, Internal Audit requested by Hollowgate Systems. A slow smile crept onto my face. The clients were starting to ask the right questions. Link to next chapter. What they didn't realize was, I wasn't fighting for a seat at their table anymore. I was building my own. The downtown cafe buzzed with morning chatter and the scent of burnt espresso. I arrived 5 minutes early, ordered a black coffee, and found a corner table near the window. When Ryan from Hollowgate Systems walked in, he didn't bother with small talk. "You're not who we were expecting," he said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I get that a lot," I replied, letting the steam from my coffee blur the edges of my face. He leaned in. "Callista's pitch last week. It was a mess, disjointed. She kept referencing data points that contradicted her own slides. Honestly, the room was expecting you." I didn't smile, not outwardly, but something in me finally settled. An hour later, in a private office above the cafe, Hollowgate confirmed it. They were terminating all future negotiations with Dorn Inc. "We're moving forward with a new entity," Ryan said. "Something with actual leadership integrity." I reached into my bag, pulled out a crisp card, and slid it across the desk. "I'm Marigold Consulting." "Let's do this right," I said. He looked down, then up. "It's about time." News spreads in business circles faster than wildfire in summer. Within 48 hours, 2 more clients pulled their contracts from Dorn Enterprises. Franklin scrambled to hold an emergency leadership call. Callista blamed deliberate sabotage. But then an anonymous email hit 3 industry outlets, screenshots of inflated revenue projections, internal memos edited after audits, a timeline that clearly showed how Callista had played both ends of the business, public praise while privately bleeding money into personal ventures. I didn't send the email. I didn't have to. Truth had its own legs. That evening, back in my apartment, I poured myself a glass of water and opened my dashboard. 3 new contracts pending, 5 proposals in review. The homepage of Marigold Consulting was clean, focused, simple, the company I had built in silence while being erased. My phone buzzed. A voicemail from Callista. "You've ruined everything we built." I didn't answer, but I said it aloud to my reflection in the window. "You mean everything I built, while you took credit?" The next morning, I woke to a ping from Ruth. She'd sent me a screenshot of an industry newsletter. From Scapegoat to Strategist, the quiet rise of Marigold Consulting. Beneath the headline was a photo of me, taken at last week's conference. No filters, no branding, just me, speaking into a mic with my sleeves rolled and a whiteboard behind me. I texted her back. "It's not revenge, it's restoration." Later that day, while walking into the building, I caught a flash of someone across the street. Loretta. She stood near the parking meters, wearing a coat I recognized from years ago. Her arms were folded, her face unreadable. She didn't approach, just watched. I didn't wave, I didn't nod, I just walked into the building. But I saw her, and I knew she saw me. It wasn't an apology, but it wasn't nothing either. Linked to next chapter, the damage was done, but for once, I wasn't the one bleeding. I was halfway through my toast when I saw the post. A generic graphic, company logo in the corner, and a caption that made my jaw stiffen. Dorn Enterprises remains committed to transparency and resilience. Despite recent sabotage by former staff, our vision remains intact. The word sabotage was bolded. Franklin had shared it on LinkedIn, naturally. Loretta commented beneath it. Sad how some people can't move on. I took another bite of toast. It tasted like sawdust. They were rewriting the story, or at least trying to, painting me as bitter, disruptive, disloyal. But Hollowgate had already responded publicly 2 days earlier. "We stand by our decision to end our partnership with Dorn Enterprises due to consistent mismanagement and misalignment with our corporate ethics." That statement had done more damage than any lawsuit could. The local news picked it up, then a business podcast. The episode was titled, "The Rise and Implosion of the Dorn Dynasty." They played clips of Callista's past interviews and compared them to leaked internal reports. A whistleblower, anonymous of course, shared screenshots showing Callista altering numbers in presentations and deleting client complaints from dashboards. And just like that, the mirror they polished so hard shattered under its own reflection. That afternoon, I drove to Ruth's. She greeted me with a tight smile and a teacup already steaming. "I've been meaning to give you something," she said. From the top drawer of her cabinet, she pulled out a flash drive, handed it to me with both hands like it was breakable. "She asked me to hold on to this," Ruth said. "I didn't understand why at the time, but I do now." Back home, I plugged it in. It was a recording. Grandma Miriam's voice, soft but certain. "If they ever try to erase her, let them know she was always the one who stayed. Through every storm. Through silence, she stayed." I sat frozen, tears welling but not falling. It wasn't just the words, it was the timing, the intention. She'd known. I didn't post the whole recording. That wasn't the point. Instead, I wrote a single paragraph and posted it to my personal site, which up until then had only held archived press releases and a short bio. I've never needed to defend what I lived, but since others are choosing to distort it, here's the truth. With proof. Attached were annotated timelines, select screenshots, and the audio file. I didn't name names. I didn't need to. The next day, my inbox flooded. Clients, former colleagues, industry peers. "Thank you. I knew something didn't add up. You handled this with class." And one message, from a venture fund I'd once pitched under the Dorn umbrella, read, "We'd like to explore partnership opportunities, this time with you." I closed my laptop and stepped onto the balcony. The air was crisp. My tea was still hot. I whispered a line I'd scribbled in a notebook years ago, but never dared live by until now. If you want to fly, you have to give up the things that weigh you down. Toni Morrison. That evening, an unexpected message landed in my inbox. Subject: Guest Lecturer Invitation, from Wharton School of Business. We'd love to invite you to guest lecture on ethical leadership in modern enterprise. Let us know your availability. I laughed. Not out loud, just one of those laughs that sits in your chest and warms everything it touches. I clicked reply. I've got a few stories to share. Link to next chapter. I wasn't just moving on, I was becoming something they could no longer define. Monday morning brought a soft breeze and the kind of light that made everything look gentler than it actually was. I walked the 2 blocks from my apartment to the office like I had done so many times before, but everything felt different now, not just lighter, quieter, like the noise had finally moved somewhere else. On the corner of 4th and Lamar, I passed the old Dorn Enterprises building. For a moment, I slowed. Through the glass lobby, I saw Callista, hair scraped back too tight, her smile strained as she gestured toward a wall-sized chart behind her. She was mid-pitch, selling something, maybe herself, maybe the version of the family we all pretended existed. We breathe the same air, I murmured, but we're no longer in the same world. Inside Marigold, the energy was different, steady, grounded. My staff greeted me not with performative enthusiasm, but with the calm respect of people who were actually allowed to breathe. I stopped by the front desk, checked in on our intern's onboarding, then headed up to my office. A framed photo of Miriam sat behind my desk. She was laughing in it, head tilted back, eyes squinting, a teacup in hand. Right beside her photo was a new plaque I had just ordered. Founder, Seraphine Hale. I signed my first university contract that morning with a health research institute that had quietly reached out after my statement went viral. They didn't ask for Callista. They didn't ask about my family at all. They just wanted strategy and integrity. On the memo line, I wrote, "Restoration, not revenge." Around noon, I took a break and walked down to the neighborhood market for something simple: a sandwich, sparkling water, and a few fresh plums. That's where I saw them. Loretta and Franklin. They were standing near the flower section. He looked older, shoulders slumped. Loretta's hair was pinned too carefully, like she'd taken extra time just to appear unaffected. They noticed me before I could slip away. We didn't hug. We didn't exchange pleasantries. We just paused. Loretta glanced at my shoes, then up at my eyes. "You look, well," she said quietly. I nodded. "I am." That was all. I turned and walked to checkout, not looking back. It didn't hurt, not anymore. Back home that evening, I opened my journal. I hadn't written in it since Grandma passed. I let the pen move without filtering. I used to think I needed them to choose me, to say I mattered. But silence isn't always rejection. It's also clarity. I thought of the version of me who once sat on the porch with a school trophy, waiting for someone, anyone, to come take a picture. They never did, but now, I had my own team, my own clients, my own camera. That night, I drove myself to the celebration dinner we'd planned weeks ago. My staff was already there, candles lit, wine uncorked, laughter filled the restaurant, real, unrehearsed. I stood, made a short speech. Success isn't just what you survive, it's what you choose to carry forward. I'm not here despite what happened. I'm here because of what I chose after. Applause filled the space. Not polite, not pitiful. It felt like acknowledgement without conditions. Later that night, after I'd kicked off my heels and wrapped myself in my favorite old sweatshirt, I noticed an envelope slid beneath my door. No return address. Inside was a faded photo, me and Miriam on the porch swing, laughing over a shared bowl of cherries. I hadn't seen this photo in years. Maybe Ruth had found it. Maybe it had been stashed in one of Grandma's old drawers. At the bottom, in cursive I would recognize anywhere, were 3 simple words. She always knew. Link to next chapter. Maybe this wasn't closure, but it was enough to start something entirely new. The end of the quarter came faster than expected. We hit every metric I'd forecasted, then some. 5 new contracts, 2 renewals, a partnership with a university health group. Our revenue doubled. Marigold Consulting, built from the ashes, had outpaced every projection. On Friday, I stood before the team in our main conference room. No fanfare, no slideshow, just a plaque behind me that read, "Built from fire, forged with facts." I smiled at it every morning. I still did. That afternoon, I drove across town to a small event hall nestled behind a community library. It was modest, intentionally so. Inside, folding chairs were arranged in neat rows, and a podium stood at the front with a small bouquet of sunflowers, Miriam's favorite. We were there to award the first-ever Miriam Hale Memorial Scholarship. The recipient, a sharp, soft-spoken high school senior named Andrea, stood beside her mother, a woman I hadn't seen in almost a decade. She had been a junior accountant at Dorn Enterprises. Callista had fired her without warning after a budget error she didn't make. A scapegoat. A disposable. Andrea stepped up to the podium with tears in her eyes. "This isn't just money for school," she said. "This is proof that people remember when you do the right thing." She hugged me tightly, and I held on longer than I expected. The media covered it lightly. A photo of Andrea holding the award made it onto the front page of the local business section with a headline that made me laugh under my breath: "The legacy Callista couldn't buy." The next morning, I sealed an envelope addressed to Franklin Dorn. Inside, a signed statement. "Effective immediately, I, Seraphine Hale, relinquish all familial claim to Dorn Enterprises, in name, asset, and association. The Marigold name stands alone." I enclosed a copy of a flagged 2024 tax discrepancy, an error caught by Driftshade's external auditors. Nothing explosive, but enough to raise eyebrows. On top of it, I placed a yellow post-it note. "Clean your books. Clients talk." I mailed it certified. By Wednesday, the fallout began. The IRS opened an inquiry. Driftshade cut ties with Dorn Enterprises. Vendors pulled back. Franklin had what Loretta described as a minor health event. She declined all interviews. Callista deleted every social media profile by Friday. No farewell post, no final spin, just gone. I got a voicemail from a blocked number. No words, just silence on the other end. But I knew it was her. I stood at Lady Bird Lake that evening, watching the water roll lazy against the rocks. For once, I wasn't carrying anything. Not their names, not their expectations, not their silences. They buried me with their silence. I built a future with mine. A quote floated in my head, something I'd scribbled on a sticky note a year ago and stuck to my bathroom mirror. "Revenge isn't fire. It's foundation." Later that night, as I curled up on the couch with a book and a cup of peppermint tea, the door buzzed. Downstairs, a package. No name on the return address, but I knew the handwriting on the envelope the moment I saw it. Ruth. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Legal. A deed transfer. The Hale cottage. The one Miriam had grown up in. The one she once told me always felt like a place someone could start over. At the bottom of the page, a note in Ruth's careful handwriting. "You reclaimed the family. Now here's where you start your own." Link to next story. Universe. I didn't just end a chapter. I authored a new dynasty.